Welcome to the SmartQA Musings, which is a gentle flurry of interesting thoughts. And today, this musing is a third in the Human Symphony in Testing Trilogy. And it is titled Dialogue, Listening to Test Outcomes. So in the SmartQA Musings Trilogy, Human Symphony in Testing, he mused on fluidity, which is about flow in the approach of testing. And in the second one was about rhythm and the cadence of testing act. And the current one, it's about dialogue, where we reimagine testing as a performance, as a dialogue really, in the age of intelligent systems. So in all these three, the focus has been on reimagining testing as a performance, a relationship, and now as a dialogue. And in this final part of the trilogy, we move from inner sensing to an outward conversation, where systems speak through their outcomes, where the testing is no longer a passive observation, it is an intelligent conversation. In the first one, the fluidity, we learn to embrace flow in the approach, moving away from the rigid test scripts to adaptive exploration. Whereas in the last one, the second one, we looked at how quality lives in the rhythm, in the tempo, the presence, the attention. We apply the perception outward to sense rhythm as dimensions. And in this one, we will look at how dialogue, the deepest layer where systems communicate back and forth, and how they speak to us through outcomes, where the entire act of testing is not just observation, it's a conversation. Now, how do systems speak to us? Maybe in three languages. One in terms of surprises, confirmations, where they tell us what we normally expect. Or sometimes it's the converse of that, surprises, responses that we don't expect. And the last, the absolute silence, the absence of a response. So systems speak to us in three voices: confirmation, surprise, and silence. And each of them reveals something about the system's health and character. And that's what we're going to muse about today. For example, in the case of confirmations, it can be many ways. If it's a UI system, it could be a message that shows up, hey, file saved successfully. If it's maybe an API, maybe it's an HTTP API, so it sends back a message. It says 200 OK, I processed it successfully. If it's a backend service, it records as the success in the log. I completed this task. If it's an AI, it probably gives you a sense of confidence as a score. I'm fairly sure of this. All these are various forms of confirmation based on the interface that we interact with, UI, API, service, or the AI. Some examples, what it means in the case of unexpected responses, surprises, are these, where Zoom says, hey, connection is poor. Or the API says, well, here is an exception, or here is a null. In the case of a service, maybe it's retrying constantly. The intention is to recover, but it has not yet done that. An AI gives me a different answer every time. So all these are unexpected responses, right? What do we want? We want it to tell us what to do next, but it is giving me something that is unexpected. And lastly, the absence of a response, which I'm sure we have experienced many times, especially in UI. An endless spinning loop of spinner, the hourglass not going away. It kind of leaves you uncertain. Or an API, it doesn't time out, seems hanging, indicating that I disappeared without explanation. In the case of a service, logs missing some entries. You didn't even know if it happened or not. On the AI, it doesn't tell you why and how it got the answer. So it's refusing to divulge the reason, kind of saying, I don't know, I won't tell you why. So these are the three kinds of languages systems speak with. Now let's switch over to looking at the notion of quality itself and see if it is changing now. Is there a new set of ETs that we have? Most often, we look at the traditional notion as, did it work? Pass or fail? But what is now required based on the dialogues is hearing richer qualities, going beyond the pass or fail, of trust, like a banking app during failures guides us and tells us what to do, or care, like the notions unlimited undo, so that we don't mess up our creative process. If we've done something bad, we can go back and back and back, unroll the issues that we had. Or the notion of integrity, where WhatsApp or Signal or any of these messaging apps tells you very clearly that I have delivered your message by giving an extra tick. Or in the case, let's say, of a system where we're like doing a webinar or a meeting, like Zoom, it honors, it controls the honored legacy of all the participants, not just the host. And bottom line, all of these require dialogue, not just test cases. So we are listening beyond the typical binary of pass or fail. And therefore, there is a shift in paradigm where we move away from the traditional notion of software quality as reliability, usability, etc., the typical ETs, which measure what the system can do, to understanding relationship qualities, the new ones like humility, empathy, transparency, integrity, and so on, where it is about measuring how the system relates to the humans. So it's, in a way, evolution of the verification validation to a conversation, because the newer relationship qualities cannot be judged by a mere observance or evaluation. It needs a conversation. Right? So traditional qualities measure what systems can do, whereas the relationship qualities of the new age systems measure how they relate to us. And therefore, there's a shift in the qualities that we measure, like the ones on the right are the new relationship qualities. Let me read out some of them. Maybe like trust. Can I rely on the response? Or care? Is it thoughtfulness about the experience? Does it keep the promises? That's integrity, right? Or transparency. Does it explain its reasoning? And so on. The traditional ones, which I'm sure you know, are on the left. But so now we have got maybe some more. I have listed down 18 of them here, which are all the relationship-oriented quality attributes which are discerned from a dialogue. So now let's kind of muse about, okay, how do we conduct this dialogue? What are the spectrum? Are there different ways by which we have conduct dialogue? Yes, of course we do. We have the UI, the visible dialogue, where the dialogue is a command, a response, most often synchronous and certainly deterministic. The relationship seems to be there is a tool, a UI-based tool. I click, I choose, I do some stuff, which is waiting for instructions. I invoke it. And how does it speak to me? In terms of messages, in terms of visual feedback, in terms of progress bars. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to test for clarity and tone in this exchange. How? By which is asking a question, does this action, by clicking a button or doing something on the UI, produce a certain result? Right? I'm sure you appreciate that much more easily. You go there, fill in a bunch of information in a banking app, and then say, okay, transfer this money from so-and-so person to, or from me to another person. And then hopefully at the end of this transaction, you expect to see a meaningful confirmation. Yes, I have transferred the money. And so the entire dialogue is very visible. Right? And certainly it is clear, deterministic, and reasonably immediate. So we also have the invisible dialogue, which is from the system-to-system communication via APIs and services, where APIs speak in terms of status codes like 200, 404, 500, and so on, responses like JSON and so on. So what are we trying to evaluate? We are trying to evaluate the integrity of the contract between one system to another system, which is evidenced by a set of messages that go back and forth. And then if there are errors, is it clear what to do? An example would be like a payment API from Stripe. I do some transaction. I want to see a clear flow. I want to know, let me connect, let me authenticate, and so on and so forth. There is a clear set of exchange of messages, which is the contract. And if there is an error, if the payment could not be accomplished because some information is incorrect, then you want to know what to do next. And therefore, there's a very clear notion of maintenance of integrity between the promise and the actual delivery. In the case of services, they speak to us via logs, metrics, checks. The quality is about transparency. Do I understand information through the logs? Is there accountability of operations that are done because I can trace it in a log? So if I have a background service which sends email whenever key actions are done, maybe it needs to log saying that, this action was done, I'm sending out an email. And if there's a trouble sending out email, maybe another message which says, look, I am retrying. Maybe it retries a few times and then says, look, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. Now that is an example where it is being clearly telling the accountability. It is being very transparent in terms of what it's doing. And that's what we want to measure as relationship quality of a service. And all these are system to system dialogue. And there's no visual layer to soften the edges, right? Now, in the case of an AI system, the dialogue is a bit unpredictable. Like we have LLMs and models and recommendations. It's probabilistic, it's adaptive. It introduces variability. So what do we test? We test for stability and intent, not just output. And it's a fundamental shift with respect to AI because of its probabilistic nature. So it takes, because it gives us different responses, we have to judge in terms of confidence scores. So what are we trying to examine? Honesty, consistency of the content. Right? We're looking for signals of uncertainty. We're looking for helpful intent, stable despite the variation, which I'm sure we all experienced in some of those, the popular ones like ChatGPT, where it gives us different answers, but same helpful intent. And that's where the boundaries start becoming to blur. The system surprises in ways deterministic systems could never do. So it is no more just about verifying. We are discovering what system is capable of becoming. And then going along to the notion of bots before we talk about agents. Bots is about an illusion of understanding because it's seemingly have a simulated conversation, a very driven more often by a bounded training, which is great for simple queries, but it kind of keeps on looping, living itself as like an echo chamber on exceptions. So what are we trying to validate? Humility. Does it admit where it's not able to provide a solution? And therefore, does it escalate it? Does it ask, say, hey, look, I don't know your answer. Let me hand it off to another supervisor, maybe a human. So the bots are very fascinating because they simulate a conversation well, but they are very bounded by training. The frustration, they keep on saying the same thing, which I'm sure a lot of us experience. Me for sure, I suffer with some of those bots, which is not very enjoyable because you're very frustrated because it's not able to solve your problem. What I'm looking for is, does it gracefully admit, I'm sorry, I don't know, it's complex. Let me connect you to somebody else. Or you please contact somebody else. That's the distinction. So what we're trying to find out is the illusion of understanding. And lastly, agents, which do work on behalf of us, a delegated dialogue. Because agents acts for us. Act as us, not for us. So what are we trying to judge? We're trying to judge the alignment and trust when they're not watching. Because it is seemingly goal-oriented and proactive. And it speaks to us in terms of reports, explanations, suggestions, and so on. So what we're really looking for is explainability, the autonomy, which is how well it is bounded, and how's the alignment to what it's supposed to do. Do its decisions align with our intent? Like maybe a coding agent which fixes bugs autonomously, right? So the spectrum of dialogue has shifted over the years, right? And that's where we are. It's very clear boundaries from a UI to a very fuzzy, delegated agent-oriented dialogue. On the leftmost side, the UI was fairly straightforward. It just simply seemed we were trying to evaluate, does it work? Whereas the extreme right, which is an agent, which is completely delegated, is it, can I trust it? Can I trust the judgment? Because it's acting for us, like us, as us. In between is the API services, AI and bots, where we're looking at, is API keeping the contract? Is services, is behaving with integrity? The AI, is it consistent? Bots, does it admit its limits? What's the common thread? Trust, integrity, respect, humility, and maybe transparency. And therefore, the conversation has a various different sense of spectrum, right? From a very clear boundary to a more grayish right side. Let's take it further up. Is it just conversing, or are systems influencing us? Now, the bunch of arrows that you see on the left, the three of them, which is bidirectional, conversation. When I talk, system responds. System tells me something, I respond. And now we are moving away to a mechanism where the system, being intelligent, starts influencing what I should do. And therefore, it is trying to act autonomously and in a way condition me, influence me. So we are no more a conversation partner. It subtly tries to understand my behavior from now and certainly from the past and starts influencing me. So systems start shaping my choices, which I'm sure we experience in some of the social media applications, right? Simpler ones, the kind of ads that you see, the kind of information that you're presented with. So the testers must now learn to sense the shift and evaluate the ethics of intelligence, of influence. It is no more about what a system telling me to how the system is shaping me. Example being a TikTok. So when dialogue becomes an influence, it's important to understand this power dynamic, this major shift, because it's no more about being technology. It is now changing your way you think, you act, you behave, you consume. Changes the sociology. It affects an individual's and the collective behavior of the community itself. Right? So the early spectrum, we command, they respond. Later spectrum, they anticipate, learn, and shape our choices. And the question evolves, what is it telling me? How is it shaping me? Right? And that's what's happening with applications like TikTok. It's influencing. I'm sure a lot of the social applications are like that. We see that also in Amazing. When I buy some stuff, it tells me something. Hey, maybe you're interested in. And therefore, the dialogue, when it becomes an influence, there is a notion of asymmetry of power. And that's where the distance becomes more blurred. This blurring happens because systems are becoming more intelligent. Learns your rhythm. The TikTok algorithm, for example, learns your rhythm. Feeds what you want, what keeps you watching, and knows you better than what you know yourself. Happens with a lot of the applications that we currently use, and we don't even sometimes know that. Right? It kinds of create a personalized reality feed, as if it's reading your mind from unconscious microsignals. Could be like how long you passed, what you watched, what you rewatched, how fast you scrolled. So it's kind of collecting a lot of your subtle metrics, so to speak. Right? The distance between choosing content and the content choosing you is getting blurred. You can't tell anymore who is in control. So what's the implication? It's not about does the algorithm work? It's about what relationship that creates. And it's more about, does it respect your attention boundaries? Does it quietly create an addiction? Or does it keep the balance? Does it build echo chambers? Or does it facilitate diversity? And therefore, it is a very fundamental shift in how we look at sometimes testing these kinds of applications, which are constantly learning, they're intelligent. So we're testing the character of relationship between humans and technology. And therefore, how should we go about it? What's a shift in practice that we might have to think through? Maybe it's listening much more carefully. But before we get there, let's just take a quick snapshot. What can we do to practice dialogue-based testing? One, listen. We talked about 3 languages: confirmations, surprises, and silences. So one is listening. Second is ask questions related to relationship, like trust, care, respect. And remember, there is a test across the various spectrum of dialogue, the UPA, the UI, API, services, AI, and so on. And follow the conversational threads. What outcomes surprise you? Ask what system is telling me. Don't just log a bug and move on. And especially with bots, how does it respond to things beyond the comfort zone? We talked about these 18 ETs. Maybe they are interesting ETs to look and keep in mind and evaluate the system based on some of the relationship ETs like humility and empathy. And edge cases we talked about. So it's kind of going beyond and asking, how does this chatbot, for example, behave when I pose in a very interesting, exceptional question? Does it observe? I don't know. Right? It is not a new testing phase. It's a dimension of awareness you bring to what you already are doing, is what is expected from the dialogue-based testing. And that simply means listen. Because between every output and input, there is a pause. And it is in that pause that understanding forms. And what we're trying to do is to carefully listen in the moment of pause. Because we're not reacting, we're reflecting. And when we truly listen deeply, something transforms. So confirmations are a simple pass. Surprises aren't just unexpected. Silences aren't mere absence. And these patterns reveal outcomes, something more profound. the character of the system. And therefore, every test becomes an ongoing conversation. That's what happens. Confirmations reveal consistency of care. Surprises become invitations to understanding. Silences show what systems value, right? And patterns reveal outcomes, which reveal the character of a system. And therefore, every test becomes part of an ongoing conversation. And testing in the age of intelligent systems is no more about just finding what we used to call as simple bugs. It is about understanding and shaping the relationships between humans and the adaptive technology. And that's an interesting shift. So with this, we come to the end of this trilogy. And to give you a quick snapshot and a synopsis, fluidity, the first one, taught us, in some sense, to move with systems, rhythm to sense their pulse, and the current one to converse with them. And these form a trilogy of an evolution of the testing consciousness. And the first one is about laying the foundation to learn to move with the systems, flow, exploring adaptability, movement. Whereas the second one was about learning to sense an expansion, sensing responsiveness, presence, attention, joy. There's a pulse of quality. And the last one is about the system speaking through outcomes and we listening to them, hearing systems through the confirmation, surprises, and silences. And it's about the integration of what we talked about from the earlier, learning to converse with systems. The arc of internal awareness to external perception to the interactive relationship, each built on the previous ones. And that's why I thought it was an interesting trilogy. What does it do to us? Probably it transforms the way we look at how we test. From an internal awareness to an external perception to an interactive relationship, which is what we titled as fluidity, rhythm, and dialogue. It's a transformation of a practice of conscious relationship with increasingly intelligent systems. We no longer measure quality. We sense it through flow, perceive it through rhythm, discover it through a conversation. So we move from a rigid script and mechanical execution to a more fluid, immersive, adaptive testing. It's no more just about measuring system-centric quality attributes like reliability, performance, and so on, to also keep add to the basket human-centric relationship qualities like humility, trust, empathy. And the act itself is no more about control, stimulate, and observe. It is about having a two-way dialogue with systems. And this is the testing consciousness that we have probably is evolving and evolved for the age of intelligent systems. And there is therefore a fundamental transformation into the practice of a conscious relationship with increasingly intelligent systems. So as a closing note, we no longer just measure or ascertain or evaluate quality. We feel it, we sense it, we discover it through a conversation. And this is the testing consciousness evolved for the age of intelligent systems. I started thinking about this a few weeks ago. I found it very fascinating to look at it from a completely different angle. And I was very much taken into the idea of the notion of fluidity, which evolved into rhythm and later into dialogue, if you will. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. Thank you very much.